Hello gardeners! October has arrived and there is so much to plant now that cool season has officially arrived. Today I'm sharing my top 10 garden tasks and tips that should be completed in the month of October so your garden stays on track. If you're new here, hello and welcome. My name is Jara. I've been gardening all of my life and I'm a professional seed and plant nursery. I love to share my knowledge and teach others how to garden and grow food. So you've come to the right place if you want to improve your gardening skills. And if you have not watched it already, go check out my huge garden guide for the month of October. That video went live last week and lists 30 veggie ideas that can be planted right now. So yeah, lots of planting inspiration for you. But anyways, let's get into these important garden tasks and reminders that should be completed in the month of October. My first task is to start getting prepared for cold fronts. Depending on your zone, some gardeners start getting them this month in October. Other areas will start getting them in November, while warm winter climates like mine start getting them in December or January. Start stocking up on supplies to keep your cold sensitive plants warm and alive. Plan and install your preferred method of frost protection for your garden. Start familiarizing yourself with the cold hardiness of your perennial plants so you know which ones need to be covered. Cold hardiness is the lowest temperature a plant can tolerate before it starts getting cold damage. I focus on my tropical heat loving plants like my mango trees that do get some cold damage. I just make sure I have covers for them. Last year I found these extra large zip up frost protection bags for trees, which I absolutely love. I'll put a link in the description to where I found those. Decide if you want to winterize your peppers or eggplants. They are perennial as long as something like the cold, a disease, or a pest doesn't kill the plant. A lot of people like to prune the plants down to force them into a dormancy of sorts, pull the plant out of the ground, try to conserve as much of the root system as possible, put it in a pot, and then bring it inside. Whatever you do, just be prepared. Have the supplies and structures like hoops and T-posts, so if a cold front is coming, you're not stressed out trying to get it all together at the last minute. On to my second task. Now that the outside temperatures are cooling down and it's pleasant to be outside again, it's a good time to mulch the garden. I order a delivery of free wood chips from Chip Drop once a year and heavily mulch my entire garden. They deliver a huge pile like the size of my car and it takes a few days for me to move it all in place, but it's totally worth it. It's great timing too because I am mulching the base of my fruit trees, which protects them during the winter. The use of wood chips was the #1 thing that totally changed my garden because it helped me build a thick layer of heavily composted rich soil. I have a video all about that process and how I use wood chips, which I will link in the description. Now that cooler weather has arrived, that brings me to my third task, and that's to finish up any large garden projects like building new beds or planting new fruit trees. Start thinking about what you will need in terms of structures for next year's garden and start building them now that it's comfortable to be outside. I walk around my garden and take notes of things I want to build or change. I have plans to build a very large greenhouse, mini food forest, and a massive area for planting rows of veggie crops over at my second garden on my aunt's property, which is a few acres. The goal is to have everything completed before it's time to plant for spring. So I am so happy the weather is nice so I can be outside to get these things done. Moving along, my fourth task is October is a huge planting month because cool weather has arrived, which means I can start growing a wide variety of cool season veggies. So how are you going to water them? Pre-installing a drip irrigation system before you start planting is the way to go in my opinion. Using wood chips was the #1 game changer for my garden and installing drip irrigation was #2. I have flat drip tape lines to water my row crops and fan sprayers that water things growing in grow bags or containers. The entire system is controlled by a RainPoint automatic Wi-Fi enabled water timer that I manage with a free app on my phone. If you would like to learn more about how this automatic water timer works, I do have a video showing you how I set it up and use it to automatically water and fertilize my garden, which I will link below. I can't tell you how much of a time saver this has been, and I don't have to stress out when I go on vacation anymore. I can water my garden no matter where I'm located in the world. Tip #5 has to do with vernalizing garlic. If you're in a warm winter climate where you plant garlic in November or December, you need to buy your seed garlic as soon as possible and put them in the fridge to vernalize for 6 to 12 weeks. The longer, the better. Garlic needs a cold period to trigger the bulbing process. Some warm winter areas simply do not get enough cold, so vernalizing mimics a cold period and ensures you will harvest nice-sized garlic bulbs. Softneck garlic needs 6 to 8 weeks of vernalization, while hardnecks require 10 to 12 weeks. If you can't find a local source for your seed garlic, then do a Google search online. There are a lot of good companies that have seed garlic. My next and sixth task is for those of you that garden in areas prone to get hit by hurricanes. October is one of the most active months of hurricane season. It is already a stressful situation, so the last thing you want to worry about on top of preparing your home is also preparing the garden. Just get it ready in advance. Walk around your garden, remove anything that can easily fly in strong winds, secure your trellis systems, take down any patio patio umbrellas, secure your green stock garden towers, or just move them up against the side of the house. Tie young fruit trees to T-posts with parachute cord so they don't snap. Harvest all the seeds you possibly can before they fly away in the wind or get mold on them. Harvest moringa and herbs before those leaves fly away or get damaged, and process them. A few years ago, I got some pretty bad flooding in this entire garden section, and it killed all of my tomatoes growing in the ground. Because of that, I like to plant any tomatoes that I grow during hurricane season in grow bags. And that's just to ensure they're up and elevated out of the ground and don't die to root rot. My 7th task has to do with planting green stock garden towers. Currently, I have 6 of these towers because I can grow the smaller crops in here, which gives me more space to grow larger crops in my very limited in-ground garden. I clean and refill each planter with soil and refresh some of them with fertilizer before I start direct sowing seeds or transplanting starts. I dedicate one whole tower to lettuce, another to small greens like tatsoi and Swiss chard, and another to growing just large sweet onions. When you have a lot of these towers, watering them can be tedious, so I just got drip irrigation made specifically for these towers, which I plan on installing right now this month. All right, moving along, tip number 8. Now that we are going into fall and winter, you might have lots of fruit trees that go dormant. For example, peaches, nectarines, grapes, and plum trees go dormant and will drop all of their leaves. So don't be surprised if they don't look too good. That's completely normal. They are not actively growing, so do not fertilize them. It's just wasting fertilizer. But you might be growing some fruit trees that are evergreen and don't go dormant, like citrus, mangoes, and avocados. I personally continue fertilizing them through the winter. Citrus is a heavy feeder, and if you want nice green, glossy leaves, they need consistent nutrition. Things like mangoes, avocados, and lychees benefit from fertilizers higher in potassium and phosphorus with very little nitrogen. Too much nitrogen makes them grow lots of leaves, which can cause reduced flowers and fruit, and weak branches that won't support the weight of the fruit. So be careful, make sure you use a fertilizer formulated for mangoes and avocados. And speaking of fruit trees, my 9th tip is to start spraying trees with horticultural oil to suppress or smother out various diseases and pests so you have less incidence of them next year. It's too hot during most of the year for me here in Florida to spray with anything oil-based because it literally just burns my plants. So I wait for fall and winter to apply anything that is oil-based. My 10th task for October has to do with flowering bulbs. If you're in garden zones 3 to 7, it's time to plant spring flowering bulbs like tulips, daffodils, crocus, and hyacinths. The soil is still warm enough for roots to establish before winter sets in, but cool enough to prevent premature growth. Once planted, they'll remain dormant throughout the winter and bloom beautifully in the spring. If you're a zone 8 and above gardener, to be honest, spring flowers like tulips and daffodils do not like to grow in warm places. They require a cold period to grow properly. So instead, plant bulbs that like warmth, like dahlias, iris, gladiolus, liatris, and lilies. All right, everyone, that's my 10 tasks and tips and reminders for gardening during the month of October. If you're still watching this and made it to the end, I have a bonus tip for you. Fall marks the migration of birds and butterflies to the southern portion of the United States. So don't forget the birds, butterflies, and bees. Birds help by eating a ton of bad insects and pests. Set up bird feeders to attract birds into the area. Add some bird houses so they decide to stay and nest. If they hatch their young, that means they have many hungry mouths to feed, and the birds will be hunting a lot of your garden pests. The butterflies and bees are pollinator helpers. Plant lots of large, flat, colorful flowers like zinnias and sunflowers, which are great nectar sources. As the weather gets colder, flowers start to die off, which means there is not a lot for bees to forage on. So planting extra flowers really helps them build up their stored honey reservoir in their hives so they can survive through the winter. All right, that wraps up my top 10 garden tasks and tips for October. By keeping up with these tasks, you'll help your garden remain healthy, productive, and beautiful. I recommend checking out this video next, where I go over 30 different types of veggies and crops that you should be planting right now in October. Thank you for watching, and happy gardening.